John Fredericks Radio Network. Joining us now, Nick Freitas, House of Delegates member, also leading candidate Congress. His nominating convention will be in July. Nick, July 23rd, but I don't remember, but tell me the date when you come on. That one's not rigged. See, they don't rig it in the 7th. They only rig it in the 5th. That's what they do. They rig conventions. Nick's is not rigged. It's fair and honest. So that's the way you do them. And he is joining us now. Nick, great to have you with us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, John.
So, Nick, let's start with Seattle. You served as a Green Beret. I just had Robert Spaulding on, retired Air Force general. Robert Spaulding called this an armed insurrection and said that the president had to take action because the mayor called them patriots. The governor said he doesn't know anything about it. So he said they're collaborators. And he said that President Trump has to call action, get the National Guard there or get the U.S. military there and clear them out. How do you stand on this?
Well, I think when you're looking at the CHAZ, right, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, this is literally an area where people went in there and took it over, kicked out the police. And here's the funny part. They keep talking about defunding the police. We don't need the police. And what's the first thing that happened? Armed people started showing up around the autonomous zone to ostensibly keep order, but we have no idea what they're doing. And the mayor is doing absolutely nothing. And I take that back. He's not doing nothing. He's encouraging it. And so now we have a Democrat mayor that is essentially telling the citizens that live in that particular area that, hey, look, if something bad happens, no problem. Your fellow protesters will take care of you. And we're seeing this all over the place. And the one thing that it all has in common is it's Democrat-controlled areas, and they're Democrat-controlled areas that they have controlled for decades. And so I think we're getting to a point right now where I completely understand where the president's at, where it's like, wait a second, yes, we have federalism. Yes, we have localism in this country. But when the local mayor is not willing to protect the citizens, when the governor is unwilling to protect the citizens, I think the president feels a very real obligation in order to go in there and make sure that those citizens are, in fact, being protected. And if you look at how this whole movement started, it all started as justice for George Floyd. And guess what, John? We all agreed. From the president on down, everyone agreed, justice for George Floyd. Yes, we need reforms. We need to make sure things like this don't happen. We need to make sure that if you do have an officer that does something like this, they are punished, not just fired, but they are criminally punished when they break the law. But what we found is that with a lot of the movements within the left, with Antifa, even with some in Democrat leadership, that's not the end objective. They have a whole list of things. This falls under their let no crisis go to waste. And now we're starting to see a defund the police movement, which I'm telling you right now is going to disproportionately affect those people in inner cities who absolutely rely upon police security for their protection. So if they want to defund police, they should start with their own security details. How about that? How about all these privileged Democrats start with their own security details before they tell poor people in an inner city neighborhood that no one's going to show up to protect them when they need it?
I would think that would be a good start, right? We could certainly start in Congress and get rid of the Capitol Police and get rid of all the security apparatus that Nancy Pelosi has and Steny Hoyer. They all have them. They all have an entourage of guards. Just defund them and see how that goes, right?
Yeah,
start there.
That's all I'm calling for, John, is I'm calling for all of these privileged Democrats to stand up there in solidarity and say that the first people they're going to defund is their own security details. Let's see if they do it, because I'm willing to bet you they won't.
Of course they won't. So what does defund the police mean? Like get rid of the police force so you call a social worker if you're being assaulted? Like how does this work, Nick Freitas?
No, that's exactly how it works. They're essentially saying defund the police, get rid of police departments. You see this in Minneapolis. Minneapolis has a very, very liberal city council, very, very liberal mayor. The mayor actually had the courage to say, I don't think we should defund the police. He was booed. He was screamed at. He was kicked out of a protest that he was at because he wouldn't say, I'm going to get rid of the police department. And what they're saying is what we really need is more government social programs. That's right, because we don't have any government-run social programs in these areas. Oh, wait, yes, we do. We pour billions of dollars every year into the very social programs that they're talking about. But and look, I'm not saying that we can't, of course we need to, make sure that kids are educated. Of course we need to be able to have, various programs like career technical education, which, by the way, they're trying to get rid of STEM now, too, because STEM education is racist, according to some Democrats. But the idea that for a poor person in the city to pick up the phone and call the police and what, get directed to a social program? I'm sorry, but when someone's kicking in their door trying to hurt them, they don't want another speech by a Democrat. They don't want a tweet. They don't want a cute little meme. They want someone to show up and actually help protect them. And Democrats are now talking about getting rid of that. They are using what happened in order to push an agenda that has nothing to do with justice for George Floyd. It has nothing to do with criminal justice reform. It has everything to do with a larger narrative that they have been trying to push for decades, and now they feel like they have the moral authority to do so. And the people that are going to get hurt are the poor people living in those cities that are no longer going to have police protection.
So let me get this straight. If you're in this 6-block ring called Chaz in Seattle, which General Spaulding called armed insurrection, likened it to Fort Sumter, and said that's why he said the president has to act and send in the military or the National Guard. I'm going to get to that in a minute. They also want to take your guns away, but yet the people in Chaz all have guns. So
well, certainly some of them do. The question is and again, look, these are the same Democrats that tell law-abiding citizens, if you're a law-abiding citizen, they want to either make it harder to have a gun or impossible to have a gun. They want to find new ways to confiscate your guns. Now, they're not going to tell you that, right? They're going to come out and nobody wants to take your guns. We just want common sense gun control. But then we saw in Virginia, as soon as they take power, they start dropping confiscation bills. Those same Democrats now want to get rid of the police. Who do they think are going to have guns in their areas?
Criminals.
Exactly. And
unbelievable.
they're now going to be able to exploit people. They're not going to be able to harm and steal from people at will because the Democrat mayor of Seattle, refuses to use law enforcement to protect his own citizens, which is just mind-boggling to me.
John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with Nick Freitas, House of Delegates member, Republican from Culpeper. Nick is a leading candidate for Congress. That nomination is, when is that? Is that July 23rd, Nick?
No, July 18th.
It was 5 days off. I got to remember that, so I don't have to look it up. July 18th is the date of his convention, and that is an unassembled convention, drive-by, ranked balloting, blah, blah, blah. So all the delegates are set for that. Nick is the favorite there to take on Abigail Spanberger. I wonder remember in Chesterfield, the liberal women of Chesterfield, they were all gaga over Abigail Spanberger, rah, Abigail. I wonder what they're saying now where they're looking at Seattle, could happen in Chesterfield. Why not? Could happen anywhere. Also, their children can't go back to school, so they're robbed of an education. If they're playing football, sorry, soccer, sorry, baseball, nope. Basketball, nope, can't do that either. You can go on a walking tour by yourself. I wonder what the liberal women of Chesterfield are saying now. Nick, do you have any idea?
Well, I think certain groups in their their hatred for Dave Bratt pretty much took over everything. And you could see by the way that Dave was treated in a lot of these things. Dave said that if Abigail got elected, that she would vote along with Nancy Pelosi. And Abigail mocked him for it. Everybody mocked Dave Bratt for it. And then she got up there and she voted with Nancy Pelosi like 95% of the time. She has voted against President Trump more than Bernie Sanders, more than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And that's not just according to me. That's according to 538, which is a left of center think tank and data analysis group. So, no, I don't know what they're thinking now, honestly. I don't know. I think there are a lot of Democrats in Virginia that I probably disagree with them on some fundamental policy positions. But I don't think they're ready to defund their police forces. And I think what they need to understand is that, again, they may be a Democrat, but the Democratic Party is not being run by people like them. The Democratic Party is being run by people like Nancy Pelosi, and they will force you to bow the knee once you go up to Washington, D.C., or whether you're in Richmond or wherever it is. You will be forced to bow the knee. And if that means that they're going to defund your police departments, if that means that they're going to go to gun confiscation, if that means that they're going to try to radically change American society as we know it, and certainly not for the better, well, then they're going to be forced to go along with it. And the Democratic Party needs to get control of itself at this point, because we're entering this new realm where reason doesn't even come into play. Because, again, I go back to this. When that happened to George Floyd, Americans were unified around that should not have happened. We want to see reforms. We want to see justice. We were unified around that. And then what happened? Well, it wasn't good enough for the Democratic Party that we wanted justice. It wasn't good enough for the Democratic Party that we agreed that there needed to be reforms. No. Now we're going to defund the police. Now we're going to fundamentally change all aspects of American society to go in line with what the Democratic Party and yeah, you're right. Antifa was threatening to go into areas like Chesterfield, like Henrico, and like rural areas, and their thing was we're going to set them on fire. So I'm sorry. At this point, you do need to be concerned with what happens when we allow a Democrat to take charge. Because as Governor Ralph Northam has demonstrated, the guy that had a KKK robe on his personal page in his yearbook, that guy, right? He declared a state of emergency 2 days before a rally in Richmond, a rally which, by the way, tens of thousands of people showed up to, were peaceful and collected their trash and went home 2 days before.
Oh, yeah.
But then Richmond was on fire. Like, literally, fire trucks could not get to a burning building with a child trapped inside because rioters, not protesters, rioters and looters were stopping them. And it took that for Governor Northam to say, gosh, maybe we need a state of emergency here. So that's the sort of dynamic
unbelievable
that Democrats are governing under right now, and it makes no sense. There is no reason.
Well, it's anarchy. I mean, it's basically anarchy. And our rally, you were there with me. We were up top. Remember, we were on the radio for 10 hours. No incident. 50,000 people. And as far as cleanliness, the streets of Richmond were cleaner when they went home than when they got there. They picked up everything, even stuff that hadn't been theirs. They completely cleaned it, and there was no incident, but yet there was a state of emergency. He closed on the Capitol. He put up chicken wire and all that stuff.
He pulled police. He pulled police from all over the Commonwealth. So all those state troopers that were supposed to be in your neighborhoods, that were supposed to be in your communities protecting you, he brought them all to the Capitol. But now police are the bad guys, according to Ralph Northam. Now they're the bad guys, according to the Democratic Party.
And you have to defund them.
It's just absurd.
Cut their funding.
Yeah.
It's just sick. All right, so let's get to statues. I understand why people are upset about some of these Confederate statues of generals that are still there. But tearing them down and throwing them into lakes, and I mean, they are property. Of course, on CNN last night, you had a couple of senior Democratic officials saying, well, it doesn't stop at General Lee or Jefferson Davis. It's got to be, we have to tear down Washington. We have to tear down Jefferson. And then somebody said we have to take their pictures off our currency. Where's this end, Nick?
Oh, it doesn't. It's the entire, and this is what we were always concerned about, right? That it doesn't just stop. A lot of times when you see these sorts of movements go, it starts off with something that they think that, okay, we think everyone can agree that this is a bad idea, right? Even if we don't necessarily agree, they think that. And then the real agenda comes out. It's tear down Washington. It's tear down Madison. It's tear down Jefferson. It's don't look at any history and context, right? Just a bunch of, woke social justice warriors are now going to determine what's okay. Here's my question, John. When are they going to start calling for the tearing down of FDR's statue? How about Woodrow Wilson? Woodrow Wilson showed the first movie in the White House. You know what it was? Birth of a Nation, a Ku Klux Klan propaganda film. When are we tearing down Wilson's statue? When are we tearing down FDR's statue? Right? The problem with all of this, and here's the question I have to ask. There has been one Republican mayor of Richmond in the last 130 years. There was one in 1988, and the one before that was 1868. So here's my question. What does this do? When you tear down the statue, what does it do? How does it improve Richmond schools? How does it improve Richmond crime? How does it actually address the real issues that people in Richmond are facing right now? I would just like someone to answer that question for me. But there's never that. It's never about addressing fundamental issues. It's always about let's point to something, and then as soon as they get that, right, as soon as the Lee statue is coming down, no, now we want Washington, Jefferson. Now we want Columbus. Now we want now we want Madison. And again, my question is what is your end state? What is your true end state? I would love for them to be honest about that because I'm no longer buying that this is about healing. I'm not buying that. I think they have a larger agenda. I think it goes toward a fundamental dislike of America. And John, you and I know it's not that America's perfect. But if you look at our founding principles, if you look at the principles enshrined in our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, the reason why we say we put such an emphasis on individual liberty, the reason why we put such an emphasis on all men and women are created equal, the reason why we put such an emphasis on creating a more perfect union is because we realize that people are flawed, but we wanted to enshrine those principles so it was something that we could look up to and it was something that we could strive for. And I don't think they see it that way anymore.
Well, why is the Harry Byrd statue The Bird statue on the Capitol, wasn't he part of the resistance, Ku Klux Klan, all that? Why is that statue there?
Well, that is getting that's actually been, there was a Republican that put forward a bill to remove that statue, and I think a Democrat to put forward the bill to remove that statue. So I think there's a lot more consensus around Harry Byrd, and I think here's what I think part of this comes down to, and again, this is why the context aspect is so important, right? It's about understanding the decisions people were making in the times that they were living in, and as I look at, mass resistance was just horrible. It was a part of the Jim Crow statement, and yes, Harry Byrd was a part of that. And so I think removing that is something that there's actually widespread support for. Mm-hmm. But I do think you're going to have a lot more problems for a lot better reasons when it comes to removing George Washington's statue. I mean, my gosh, John. We're talking about the father of our country. We're talking about a person that could have been a king if he wanted to.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It'll never end, because once they group, whoever they are does that, then they're going to start to burn the books. It's just, it will never end.
It's not about solving problems.
Exactly.
It's about perpetuating grievance.
Exactly.
Because
that's exactly what it is. Yeah, you're right.
Democrats have their power wrapped up in perpetuating grievance, not solving problems.
Well, look, if you're LeVar Stoney and you ran for mayor, and, of course, I was for Morrissey, so I was right. By the way, again, I was right. If you're LeVar Stoney and you ran for mayor 4 years ago on I'm going to be the education mayor. And at the time you were running, 20% of students in Richmond didn't graduate high school. That's a horrific number. Only 80% graduated. 97% of those that don't graduate, 96%, are people of color. Now you're there 4 years, and here's your record. 70% of people graduate and 30% don't. So the actual numbers of high school dropouts under your regime here is in mayor, where I am today in Richmond, went up 15%. So we went from 20% dropout to 30% dropout, and you ran as the education mayor, so you can't talk about that in November, right? You can't talk about kids getting educated in your city. So what do you talk about? Tearing down statues. Right? I mean, come on, Nick. You got 30% of kids in Richmond can't get a shot at a high school election. Are you kidding me? And you're running for re-election? So what are you going to talk about? Statues. Unbelievable. Yeah. You absolutely nailed it. Some grievance. How about educating our kids? Oh, by the way, now we can't even go back to school. So what does the 30% become? 50%? Because you can't even get an education now. Unbelievable.
Yeah. I think all the kids should show up to school and just say that they're protesting.
Bingo.
Because if you do that, then you can do whatever you want.
Exactly.
God help you if you want to go to church or get an education.
It's incredible.
But if you set Richmond on fire, the governor's got no problem. He might not even send the police to stop you.
Yeah, you could just burn the city down and loot. And, I love Richmond. This is where our businesses are. But you go downtown, the Supreme Court has been completely graffitied, all the F words on it. Pocahontas building, Nick. It's sick. It's just sick, and, no cleanup. We've done nothing. And it's like, okay, just deface everything and put bad words on it. But you can't go to school, and we can only put 10 people on a school bus, and you can't play football. So remember that scholarship you thought you were going to get, your chance to get out and get a free college and maybe a D1 or D2 school? That's gone because, you can't have contact sports. This is the Richmond we live in today, part of the 7th district that you're running in. All right, I'm almost out of time. Tell me about your race. How do you win?
No, the race is going incredibly well. We just had independent polling come out that shows us 30 points ahead of the Republican field. We've put all of our focus now on drawing the contrast between, again, our philosophy versus Abigail Spanberger's philosophy. We're running against Spanberger. I'm not running against my fellow Republicans. They're good people. I like them. But we need to start focusing on the general election because as you see what's going on across the country right now, you see the complete divergence between the two philosophies, right? One philosophy believes in empowering individuals through more opportunity. The other philosophy believes in more government power. And it seems like the only government authority or responsibility they don't seem to believe in is when it comes to actually using the police to be able to protect their citizens. And let's face it, one of the primary reasons why we even have government in the first place, it's not to micromanage our lives. It's to provide for things like security so that businesses, so that education can all flourish. And right now, the Democrats are completely ignoring the most fundamental responsibility of government in order to push an agenda which bears no resemblance to the American experiment. And so we're going to continue to call that out. We've had some great guests on. Devin Nunes was on. We had Sheriff Scott Jenkins. We've got more coming on as well, just to talk about, again, the core fundamental differences in the philosophy between the Republican Party and the new left and the modern Democratic Party.
Ken, you win on the first ballot?
Yes, I think we can.
Okay. So just so everybody knows, this is an unassembled convention. It's going to pick the nominee. It's on July 18th. It's up by Doswell, isn't it? Somewhere, right?
Yeah,
One location.
It's right at Meadows, right across from King's Dominion.
Difference between the 7th and the 5th is the 7th is honest and open. They're allowing media there. The 5th is rigged, kick the media out. It's what they do. Nothing to do with Nick. This is the other thing. If you don't win on the first ballot, I just want to take 30 seconds so my audience understands how this works. There's ranked voting. So you vote for number 1, number 2, number 3. And there's, I guess, 1, 2, 3, 4 candidates.
6.
Or 6. Okay, so you vote for 1 through 6, and it's ranked voting. But unlike an in-person convention where every round there's a new vote. So I could vote for Nick, let's say in the first round, vote for a second round, and then not vote for him in the third, or vice versa. The way this works now is on the first ballot, your number is your high watermark that never goes down. Let's say Freitas gets 45% on the first ballot, like as an example. Under 50, so we go to then the ranked balloting, but the 45 never goes down. Then the bottom person that drops out, let's say it's, just for example, Andrew Nags, anybody that had Nick as their second choice, that adds to the 45%. That's kind of the way it works. So if you're in the 40s in ranked balloting, even if you don't win on the first ballot, you never go down from there. So it's very difficult to beat somebody that's in the mid, low to mid 40s on the first ballot. But Nick thinks he can get over 50%. We'll see how it goes. But that's kind of the way it works. The media is allowed there, unlike the rigged 5th district. Nick, thank you for being with us, and good luck.
That's a pleasure.
Complete transparency and disclosure, the John Fredericks Radio Network has endorsed Nick Freitas for being the nominee. So I just want to be sure that we make that transparent as we can.